Cunnington is involved with the Victoria Autism Asperger Meetup group, and he also participates in the local vegan activist groups working to liberate non-human animals from their oppression. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Peter.
No problem.
So, first of all, when did you find the vegan path? What was that journey like for you?
Well, I've kind of always liked animals and stuff because when I grew up, I had a small 2 acre yard and we had a few like animals on it, like a cat and like some sheep and stuff like that. And my mom wasn't really vegan. We sort of vegetarian-ish, like we would try to eat like sort of vegetarian food-ish. But then as I got older, especially when I moved out on my own, I sort of bought my own food and sort of decided to go in like different styles of eating because people with autism, like they have a lot of like sensory issues when it comes to like what they eat, like food. So like I figured out that I was like really like lactose intolerant and like really bad with other stuff. And so I started experimenting with what I was eating and also because I was trying to like save money because like I was trying to eat cheaper foods when I was out in the stores. Like, and so I started to, unfortunately, a friend of mine passed away a few years ago of a stroke. And it started to get me to realize how I needed to like be more conscientious about what I'm eating and stuff. And so I ate, and then eventually at some point I saw some like YouTube videos. I think it was one about the one Paul McCartney one where it's like slaughterhouses have glass walls or something. And it just kind of started to like think about it more. And like I started to kind of get to the understanding of it. And just eventually I just kind of decided, okay, that's enough. I'll just like completely go vegan after that and a few other documentaries. And I just decided, yep, that's it. Gonna do it. And then, yeah.
Because it just all made sense from a health perspective, first of all, and then for the animals. How long ago was that you made that decision?
Well, I don't have an actual like date, exactly a day or something. It kind of progressed gradually over time. I think I was like, I said it was going, I said in my mind I was going to go vegan, and then I kind of did. Maybe I like ate like one thing that might have had some like vegan stuff in it here and there, but and then eventually I started to be more like strict about it, like eventually, and then focus on like other aspects of like clothing and other things and sort of like extend it out to really make sure I'm following this lifestyle completely. Yeah.
Right on. And so at least a couple of years. I've known you for a couple of years, I think,
Yeah.
right? So how have you noticed like improvements in your health? Have you noticed?
A little bit. I mean, I definitely was obviously realized I mean, for some reason, my mom thought it was a great idea for me to drink glass after glass of milk. I guess she was like convinced that I needed lots of like calcium or something. And I always felt really like stuffy and like really nauseated from drinking milk. And I never really thought about it. Just thought that was just normal how I'm supposed to feel. But after stopping drinking milk, for example, I feel way, way better. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but a lot of autistics have a lot of sensory issues. Some have can only eat like no gluten, no this, no that. I really don't know what that is, but it has something to do with being autistic. So yeah.
All right, well, let's shift to talk about that
Mhm.
then. So, because that's a big part of your reality.
Yep.
And we've just seen the governments did a pretty good job of supporting all of us through COVID, and then now they're clawing back some of that. And they've announced for people with disabilities are going to be where you were receiving $300 through COVID, and then now you're going to be receiving 175. Is that right?
Okay. Well, what happened was, as when COVID hit, a lot of people were concerned about because the federal government decided if you're off work, you get this $2,000 like CRB thing, but that didn't count for people on disability because they didn't lose their jobs. Some of them didn't have any jobs to start with, so they were really worried about what they were going to like, how they're going to get by because everything was like kind of locked down and they didn't want to go to the stores and spend extra on deliveries and stuff. So the government's like, okay, you can have a $300 extra added to your disability check. And now that lasted all the way up until December. And then the government, even though COVID's still on, they decided, okay, we're going to take away 150. You'll just have 150 extra above what's already very low, 180 1,183, I think it is. Yeah. So it's barely anything. And then they said, okay, well, now everyone's complaining about it. Enough people push the government. So rather than take away all the money, we'll take away a portion of the money. They say they're giving us 175, but really it's actually a reduction of 125 because really it was a 300. It should have never been taken away in the first place. So we had a rally just yesterday, and we rallied on the lawn of the legislature. Different people, Jordan Riker, was there, and some other people spoke, and we just tried to get a point across that it's not livable to live on barely anything. Even 1,500 would be not even livable, but they're giving us even less than that. So the idea is to fight for about $1,800 and way more subsidized housing and other supports. And yeah, that's basically what we're fighting for. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I watched the video of that, and our friend Jordan Reichert, as you mentioned, he's a activist, very active vegan in our community, and he also works with mental health, people with mental health issues. And he sort of suggested that the government elected people who think this is okay should try to live on this amount for a month and see what that's like. So just to clarify, so the federal government, when the COVID hit, the federal government gave working people who couldn't no longer go to work $2,000. Just here's $2,000. It didn't last forever, but for a period of time they did that. And then because you guys are in a separate sort of receiving end of subsidy,
well,
the provincial, hang on, the provincial government then said, okay, people with disabilities will top them up with $300. So that took you to like $1,500 total, right?
Yeah.
And then now they're clawing that back and saying we're going to give you $1,183 plus $175, when we know that $1,800 is absolute poverty level. So the government is saying to you, you can live under the poverty line. That's okay.
Pretty much. And there's all kinds of other clawbacks. If you live in your car, you don't receive the $375 rental supplement, which we all know is just a ridiculous rental supplement anyways. But so there's all kinds of other, you live in a backpacker inn, they don't call that a house, all kinds of bad clawbacks. And I actually was really lucky because I was one of the very rare lucky ones. I actually have a job. So as long as you were making $1,000 or whatever the amount of money per year, you're actually also allowed to get served. So I was actually lucky because the BC government said, we're not going to, normally you can only be on either disability or like unemployment insurance. But this was different than unemployment insurance. This was CERB. So the government was really generous for this small period of time and said, you just keep CERB and you keep your regular disability check minus the 300. They said it's one or the other, not the, so I got about, for like 3 months, because I collected CERB, I got about $3,000 coming in my employment, and so it was actually really, really good. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for people who had no jobs, and so that's what we're fighting for. Yeah.
And after living for so long on under the poverty line, what were you able to do with that extra money, Peter? How did that help?
Well, I saved some of it. I mean, I already had a job and I live in low-income housing, so I wasn't totally like as bad as some other people was, because my rent is subsidized by the government, and I have a small part-time job working in a factory making food. But other people just don't have that. And so some of them really enjoyed the extra added $300. Even that small amount was really good for them. And then the government just said, no, goodbye, we'll take it away. And they're trying to claim that it's the biggest increase in BC history. Well, it's the biggest permanent increase, but as we know, they're taking away 125. So yeah.
Right. Okay. And I see you've got yourself a nice headset and mic, and that's part of one thing you were able to do. And then maybe set yourself up with a new computer so you can do a YouTube channel. You said you're thinking of doing a YouTube.
I'm contemplating thinking about doing a YouTube channel because prior to COVID, I did a lot of speaking at conferences and events, which unfortunately, as we all know, has been all gone, like taken away completely. So social media is really our only last option to get the voice out there when it comes to getting the voice of animal rights and other disability rights. And so if I started my own channel, it would be a very useful way, or getting on Twitter, Facebook, blogs, whatever, just to make sure that people can hear my voice. Because as I said, all the conferences and are just closed. Yeah.
Right. And even though your housing is subsidized, you still have to pay for things like hydro and internet and all of that. Just like,
Hydro is actually included. I do have
oh,
to pay
nice.
I do have to pay for internet. So yeah, but unfortunately, what people don't realize is they don't just give you housing when you get on disability. You got to sign up for a ridiculous housing list. Wait 12. I personally waited 12 years because they
Wow.
claimed I live with my parents. So they waited, said, well, when your parents throw you out, then we'll speed you up. And I was like, well, they're going to throw me out once I get housing. It's like, so it was a whole the system is not well set up in BC for people with disabilities. Just bad.
No. And there was something where people at the rally were talking about, there's a situation where, I mean, because disabilities is a range of things, from people with cerebral palsy who need 24/7 support to people like yourself who are mostly, you know, participating in society. You just need some help. So there's something about when you apply for disability about being disabled enough. What
Yes. Well, what happens is they make you jump through these most ridiculous hoops. And same thing happened with I mean, my mom helped me when I was like moving into adulthood from teenager. So I don't quite remember how I got in this, but I do remember the housing. And we constantly tried to apply for other housing, but apparently those housing, I had to literally not be able to feed and dress myself. And so, and other people have done the same thing where they apply for disability, but apparently they have to be further disabled. Like they in their mind felt that they were disabled not to have a job and not to earn a living. But the government had a different opinion, and they thought, no, you aren't further. You need to be further disabled, which is really useless because then they're still struggling. So.
Right. And they actually use those words, you're not disabled enough.
Well, they don't say those. They don't say those actual, I don't know what the words they say exactly, but they claim that you have to be like more like, for me, for example, the housing I wanted to decide either was for families or people, as I said, you literally have to not be able to feed and dress yourself.
Right.
Which I can do. I just have struggles and some other issues in terms of like having a full-time job, having like a whole thing. It would be like too much to cover what is normal rent in Victoria, but I can feed and dress myself.
Right. Yeah, I've worked in group homes, so I understand that angle, and I think about those people now when everything's shut down, and I mean, and the whole funding thing to that sector of society is a whole other issue. But so let's talk in terms of like accessibility of jobs and accessibility of space in society for people with disabilities. We rarely see people in wheelchairs out in our world regularly. And now it's even worse. They can't go to the IMAX, and they can't go to their music groups, and I just think it must be such a challenge for them. What do you have to say about like access in society?
Well, access for society, I mean, they've done a fairly decent job in terms of physical disability, in terms of like getting around, like you can get on the bus, most buildings are accessible. But when it comes to like more like neurological disability, which autism is, it's not as good because people have like sensory issues, like maybe the perfume makes them nauseous, like the smell of someone's cologne or other things. And like sometimes like buses don't go to the places that you need to go to where you live as frequently. So people are forced to live in places where they have to like schedule their lives around things, or like apparently I've heard, I don't take it that often, but I heard Handy Dart is like really terrible. You have to book it weeks in advance. You can't just be like a cab and phone it up. I want to go to the grocery store. No, you got to like pre-schedule it. It's a whole. So it basically means people have to spend all their time scheduling and planning, and it just takes a lot of effort away from living your normal like daily routine. And as you said, like it's been a kind of a problem with COVID because a lot of these programs that people enjoyed, like as I said, my autism group, we still meet online and we still do Zoom meetings, but we haven't met in person. And it's okay with the Zoom meetings. In some ways, actually better because people from outside who didn't know how to travel are now able to link on. We might still continue the Zoom meetings partially after, but it is still nice, like through walks or things. And you're not really supposed to do that with COVID. And I used to go to the movies all the time. Those have been shut down. A lot of the programs, like the pools, were shut down. That was really important for some of my friends who do Special Olympics. So it's been not great for disabled during the COVID. Yeah.
Right. And so just I have to say good things about Handy Dart though, because when I did work with people with disabilities at a day program, so you do have to book it. You book it 2 weeks in advance, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, you can book up to 2 weeks in advance. So it does require a certain amount of planning, and it's not perfect. I agree. But if you've booked it and they can't get to you, they'll send a cab. That's kind of an
Okay.
interesting thing.
Well, it's been years since I took it. I think I took it like once. I just happened to live on a bus route, and for me, it's just easier to jump on the bus. But if when I used to live at my parents' house, they lived way out in the central Saanich area, and it was like I had to take 3 buses to get to work. Just so it was very impractical. And for if I could have booked Handy Dart, but then I would have to again book it a bunch of 2 weeks in advance, and that's yeah.
And like you said, I mean, we are talking about people with various sorts of challenges, right? So even whether you're able to get yourself set up with a computer and access Zoom, I mean, what kind of supports are there for getting set up during COVID? Could you phone someone and say, hey, I need some help with this and that because things have changed?
I don't never really looked into it. I suppose there's some like you can phone like Together Against Poverty, and they'll help you they'll probably send you, or the Disability Resource Center in Victoria will probably send you to someone. I mean, I already knew how to do Zoom, for example, but I mean, if you didn't have if you were too low income to even have a computer, or I mean, some people live in their cars or they live in the tent city, and they're like, I mean, they just they don't even have a lot of the places make you. The doctors have you do Zoom meetings, Zoom doctor visits. Well, if you don't have an actual like a computer or any way to do that, you just, I don't know, I guess you just have to go to one of the walk-in clinics, but then they're like limiting the amount of people they let in, so you have to book it. And it's not really thinking about people who are not in housing or got all the setup. That's the problem with this. Yeah.
And we don't often think about the homeless community as people with disabilities, but it's very likely that a significant portion of those people are people with various disabilities.
Oh, for sure.
Who haven't been able to get jump through these hoops as you have with some help from your family. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, my family, I mean, I'm one of the more luckier people because my family, as I was diagnosed with autism when I was 15 years old at a really amazing place called Queen Alexander. I mean, I never even knew about autism before that. I kind of vaguely heard about it. Officially, my diagnosis is Asperger syndrome, but now they folded that in. So I just say autism spectrum, which is more easier. If people ask me what my diagnosis specifically, I will tell them Asperger syndrome. But so anyways, so my mom knew early on that I had it. I mean, some people know as early as 5 now. They're doing much greater work and they can guess at that age, but I didn't know till 15. And so my mom knew what to do. She got me on the supports. She got me on the housing list. And I said I was able to wait at my parents' house for like maybe about 12, 13 years on the waiting for the housing. But other people aren't as lucky. They have to just take whatever they can get, basically.
And you ended up in a good place, thankfully. You have some pretty good housing now. But is that the first housing that you got?
Yeah, the first permanent housing, yes.
Well, you're lucky because some of it's better than others too, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's actually it used to be a building just for people who are 55 plus, but because the government changed the regulations, they allowed for like younger people to join in. And unfortunately, prior to COVID, we had events, like we had a room and we could go down to the room and meet up with other people. But because COVID hit, they came by and they locked up the room. So now we just see people sometimes outside when they're like out there smoking or something, but really I don't smoke, but as they pass them by when they go inside. And then other times I see people in the hallway, but it's not as much as I used to. So it's a little bit isolating, I have to say.
Right, absolutely. Well, luckily you have the Autism Aspergers meetup group. So yeah. And what kind of things do you guys get up to, like pre-COVID and then during COVID?
Well, prior to COVID, we would do a meeting at least once a month at a place in Victoria. We sometimes met at this house, other times restaurants. We kind of bounced around to find places because everything charges lots of money, so we'd do the best we could. But then sometimes we would do like other activities, like we might go bowling or like a walk or like movies when they were actually open, and like other things of that nature. But yeah, just to meet people, because there's like almost zero actual supports in Victoria for people and the programs for children. Their parents will take them there. When you reach adulthood, you get your disability checked. Maybe you get a little bit of counseling, but support groups, no, barely any. So this other girl named Iris Gray just started her. She actually didn't start it. Someone else actually officially started, but she took it over. And I help out. Like I'm one of the event organizers, so I do. If she can't make it to events because she has work and stuff, I do other things. I said like bowling or walks or just that kind of things.
Nice. Well, hopefully you can get back to some more of that soon.
We're hoping once COVID restrictions lift. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So just one final thing, when we're thinking about the funding, I think we all appreciate now that a universal basic income wouldn't just result in a bunch of people sitting on a couch all
No.
day. Obviously, we all want to be active. Well, most of us, right? We want to be active members of society. So I think there is like a federal discussion now of actually a guaranteed livable income. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard talks about it, but I mean, I think there's been some whispers about it for years. I don't know how serious this is. So
There
we'll
has, but
see. We'll see.
it seems like it's getting more. They've actually got a bill that
Okay.
talks about forming a committee to figure out how to do it. So I mean, it's a step forward, but that would eliminate all these other things like the welfare, which is way less than what you folks
Oh, welfare
pay.
is about. I think welfare is like $900. It's really really low.
Right, they can't figure out where all this homelessness is coming from, as
Yeah.
when so it would, eliminate that and the PWD supplements, and just everybody get the same amount, and then we can contribute to our local economies, and
Exactly.
away we go, right? Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about being vegan and how you self-identify, Peter. So I've heard it said that we don't want to refer to folks as autistic, but we say you're a person with autism. Is that an
No, no. What I actually say, it's actually the opposite. Sorry. What I say is well, I personally say is I'm on the autism spectrum because I don't live like I've always had autism my whole life. Like I've never. People say, "What's it like to have autism?" I couldn't tell you what's like to have autism because I've never not had autism.
Right.
I was born with autism. For me, autism is just being me. Like I was born this way. I grew up autistic, so I have no variants of not autistic. I can only tell you what it's like to be in society with autism, but I don't. It's not like something I'm living with. It's just a part of my general existence. And I also like to say disability. I like to focus. Some people like to say, "Oh, it's like a difference or a special ability." Well, that's if I just say disability, that's what it is. It's not to be ashamed or embarrassed about it. I don't feel that I have to hide being disabled. If I'm just proud to be disabled, and society is working on making it better, and that's who I am. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's good to know. And it's almost like an invisible disability too, right? Because you're not in a wheelchair, and so
In
sometimes
some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I mean, if I feel like really overwhelmed, or if someone knew me or spent a lot of time with me, they might notice more obvious things. But it's not like, no, as you said, it's not like in a wheelchair where you can physically see the wheelchair. But it's also not like it's totally like a lot of people do what's called, I don't know if you heard of called masking. It's where you learn traits and techniques. It's almost like acting, like you see other people doing these sort of traits and techniques, and over time you do them. You don't really stop having autism, but you kind of know what others are doing, and you don't do and it kind of is a good idea because then you can kind of fit in certain places. And it's not a bad thing to be masking completely. I mean, sometimes it can be kind of hurtful if you have to do it all the time, every minute of the day, become kind of stressful. But if you here and there, like in movies, you want to be quiet, you don't want to jump around, that kind of thing. So certain times it can be useful. So yeah.
So for people who aren't aware, I think people on the spectrum take comfort from stimming. Is that something that that you do? Can you
Yeah.
explain what that is?
Well, stimming is just basically there's different types of stimming. I mean, some people might like have one of those like I don't know, like fidget toys you might play around with, or like spinning, or like hand flapping, or like it just depends on the individual person. I mean, more people with like what I say called like classic autism might be more obvious when it comes to stimming. They might like literally flap around or jump about, and it really helps to relax you, and because it gets you sort of it's just like you ever done like a workout and you feel kind of like relaxed because you're kind of like moving your muscles around, and you get your chance to sort of, and it just helps to kind of loosen you up a bit, sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. So when we see those activities, we shouldn't try to stop people from doing that as long as they're not hurting themselves.
As yeah, as long as they're not flopping in someone's face or literally hitting somebody, that is to me is a perfectly acceptable. I mean, obviously you won't be like shouting in a movie theater or something, but I mean, but again, you simply flapping your arm about, yeah, I see no reason. That seems like it hurts nobody. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So some people have suggested that there are ways to cure autism. I think you feel fairly strongly about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, autism's not a bad thing. So, I mean, a lot of people we think maybe some people like Einstein may have had autism. We don't know because it wasn't diagnosed back then. There was no such thing as the word autism, and so we don't know. But we think that people like Einstein had autism. So he may not even be able to tie his own shoe, but he did amazing things. Because so no, autism should never be cured, and you shouldn't. When I say you shouldn't cure autism, it doesn't mean you should not work in your life to make a better life for yourself, but that's the difference from being cured. You still have autism and you'll still be considered autistic, but you might you know learn how to like take the bus, or learn how to like do certain functions, or learn how, again, as I said, not screaming in the movie theater, just those kind of things. A small little changes, as long as you're not hurting yourself or suppressing any kind of thing in your life, then really that's but again, that's different from actually curing autism. Yeah.
Right. So because it's just who you are, like you
Yeah,
say. And so on the flip
exactly.
side, then some people believe that you can get autism from like a vaccine. So you
No,
say no.
that's been wildly debunked. The guy who said that was his license was revoked, and it was completely debunked. And there's a lot of other myths about certain, I mean, drinking, for example, some people think literally drinking milk is bad for you, but it's not going to give you actually autism. I mean, some people, they might not, as I said, I had some, because I'm very lactose intolerant, so I have issues with drinking milk, but I don't have, it didn't give me autism. I mean, when I was a kid, I drank milk. Unfortunately, I didn't know all the how bad it was and bad for the cows and all that. So I didn't know anything. So I drank it, but it didn't give me autism. But it also didn't help me with my autism. It made it probably worse because I had lots of like stomach aches and lots of like problems with. So it helps to improve your life by doing certain things, but you still have autism. And so there's no cure, as there's no like vaccines don't give you autism or anything, but there are things that you can do with diet and other aspects that'll gently improve your quality of life with autism.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how are you feeling about the COVID vaccine? Are you going to get that?
As far as I know, it's fine. Yeah, unfortunately, it's been some tests have done on animals, but again, we as vegans, we can't avoid all animal. It'd be impossible. I would never take a pill, or I would never take anything. So I'm just gonna wait to see until my group. I think people with disabilities might get it sooner than the general public gets it. I suspect. So as soon as I can get it, I'm just gonna go and get it because I have no. As far as I know, any side effects are way less worse than actually getting COVID. So I really like to just get it as soon as possible, basically. Yeah.
Do you know when that's going to be yet? Have they given you a time?
There's no one's called me up for a vaccine or anything. My
Okay.
mom got it a few days ago. That's all I know. So
The good news is the bad news is that yes, they did a lot of clinical trials on animals with the vaccines, which means they had to give COVID to these animals, poor
yeah.
things. I mean, how horrible is that? However, apparently the AstraZeneca and the other most popular one is there's no animal ingredients in the vaccine. So
Yeah,
that's a good,
that's what I've heard. Yes.
yeah. So, okay. All right. So, what would you recommend? Like, if you could talk to government people directly, what would you suggest that they could do to help improve the lives of people on the spectrum and other
Well,
people with disabilities?
right off the bat, giving everyone $1,800 right off the bat,
Oh,
instantly $1,800 right off the bat, and that would be the first step. And the second, further steps down the line: better housing, better mental support, better doctor visits, more clinics that people could go see, um, just easier access to stuff. I mean, it's fairly okay accessing buses if you live in an area. Better programs to, if you are able to work a little bit, because you can work a bit when you're on disability. You're not allowed to work at all. You could just earn a certain amount of money, and then after that they tell you that no, you either lose disability funds or you get it clawed back, basically, because they don't want people like, if you're able to work like full time, then you wouldn't obviously be on disability. But those supports, just, yeah, basically just, I mean, as I say, right off the bat, $1,800 right off the bat, and then further down the line supports from there. Yeah.
okay. And what kind of things would you want to do for the animals?
Well, right now, I mean, in Victoria, for example, I'm getting rid of the horse carriages. That's a big thing, because that's been a big subject that a lot of us have dealt with and dealing. I mean, obviously with COVID, as we know, it was, the leading suggestion is it was caused by animal agriculture. So it's really, I think, if you want to avoid further lockdowns and further viruses, then we want to really think about getting rid of animal agriculture, or at least in significantly improving it. But obviously, getting rid of it is the best solution. And I mean, just making everyone go vegan. I mean, I can't make everyone go vegan; that would be impossible. But really encouraging that more schools educate people on animal agriculture. The government programs implement. I mean, getting rid of the animal subsidies so that your the animal foods are equal to the prices. I mean, cauliflower at the store sometimes costs like $5. We can get a couple pieces of chicken breast for like $1 or something. Well, who's going to pick the cauliflower then? They're going to pick the cheap chicken breast. But as we all know, they're cheap not because they're cheap because of animal subsidies and how they genetically modify the chickens. So that's what makes it cheaper. But people are just woefully unaware of this. So making more education in schools, making more awareness, and just improving. And also for Victoria, a great option would be, it's something that Jordan also talked about the rally, pet-friendly housing. Because a lot of people, I'm sure you're aware of this, that having animals is going to be very therapeutic, but people have to pay a premium above their normal rent to even have a pet in their house. And some places, mine doesn't even allow pets, period. And all the low-income housing, maybe if you're lucky, you can have a place with one small indoor house cat, if you're lucky, or a tiny hamster in a cage. But no dogs, no, and when I was a kid, as I told you, I lived on a farm, and that was very therapeutic to have all these animals around, but I can't do that. And so it's a bit lonely, and especially living on my own, and a dog or a cat would be a nice touch. But so the government of BC hasn't made that, allow that for all places. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things Jordan is working on is trying to get the ability to have a companion animal determined individually, rather than like, this building has no pets or whatever. Like, these people in the building have proven that they can do this responsibly, so they can have companion animals, like that kind of thing. And I think there was some suggestion at the rally too that rent could be like that. Why should we all be paying market rents, those of us that have to pay market rents, when some of us are earning minimum wage and some people are earning way more than that? So there's lots of good changes that we could do. Let's talk about, unless you want to say anything about that.
No, that's about it.
You want to talk about your visit to the UK. Was that 2 years ago?
Okay, well, the last time I went to the UK for this event, 2 events. I went for 3 events really, but the 2 vegan events were the Animal March put on by everyone's heard of Earthling Ed. He put on the Animal March, and then the other event was the UK Vegan Campout. Now, how I found out about this was I was working for a while at this great place it's in Victoria called the Very Good Butcher, and I don't work there anymore. It's nothing to do with the company. They became a bigger company. They moved forward. I felt like going in a different direction. I don't work there anymore. So I had saved up some money by working there, and I was in between jobs. Now I got a different job instead, and I was in between jobs, and I had heard about this event, I don't know, online or something. I don't remember where, YouTube, somewhere about that, called UK Vegan Campout. And I looked at it, I watched the video. If you go to YouTube and you just type in UK Vegan Campout, you'll get a video. The last time, unfortunately, with COVID, it was canceled last year. But the last time I was on was 2019. It's a great event with food and speakers and activists, and you camp there in a big field, and it was just amazing. And so I thought, well, okay, I have some money saved up now. And so I actually was born in the UK. Like, I was born in Oxford, England, in the UK. So my grandparents still live there. My cousins still live there. And it was an opportunity to also go see them. And I'd been there before for other events. I've been to Scotland and other types of events. So I thought, okay, I think I can afford to go. It sounds like doable. So I got all the funds set up, and I saved up my money, and I rented some very inexpensive dorm rooms in London, and I went there, and I went to the march first of all, and I was actually able to meet up with some people at the march. There's a couple. They have an online YouTube channel called Those Annoying Vegans. Anna and Brian, their names are, and they said they were going to the UK. I had no idea they were going when I planned my trip, but they mentioned on their channel they were going, and they mentioned they were going to meet up at this place. Actually, Earthling Ed owns a restaurant called Unity Diner. Now it's a bigger location with like a whole cocktail bar, and it's a huge location now. And it gives all the money to his organization, which is put money into his sanctuary, which is like an huge 18-acre sanctuary that he has now. And so I went there, and they had booked a table, and I went and met the Anna and Brian there, and we had a little meetup the night before the march, because they were going to the march. And then the next day went to the march, a huge march that goes all through London, and we stopped in Trafalgar Square and actually occupied the square so no one could get into the square. And it was maybe 1,200 vegans, and like, it was so many people. And the marches culminated all around the world. Like, there was one in Toronto that the Animal Protection Party of Canada went to, and there was one in Australia, a whole bunch of countries, and they did different marches on the same day. And so I went to the march, and it was a great day. We walked through the city, thousands of people. Then we met up went to this place. There were speeches and stuff, and that was amazing. And then that ended. So then we later in the day we met up and we went out for dinner. The same people. Other people went their way. I went my way. Did some other stuff, because the march and the camp out were about 2 weeks apart. So I went off to Scotland, and I did some other touring, and there was a festival there called the Fringe Fest, which is the world's biggest fringe festival in the entire world. So I went there, did some shows, did some stuff, saw my grandparents, and then came back to London, stayed for a couple of days, then took the train to this place called in Newark, and where they have this big showgrounds. Unfortunately, it was other times of year they use it for a horse riding, but there was a bit of a controversy, but that's the best they could do with having I think it was about 10,000 people at the camp out, quite a lot. And so there's like 45 food stalls serving everything from vegan sushi. I mean, obviously everything's vegan, but vegan sushis, burgers, like faux chicken burgers, and pizza for breakfast. Like, it's amazing. Yeah. And there was the speakers were like Earthling Ed, like a whole bunch of like that vegan couple. So a whole bunch of people. Yeah.
Tell us some more about the food. I know you when you came back, that was, you just couldn't stop talking about all the food.
They had 45 food stalls that were there. Earthling Ed brought he has a truck. It's like called Off the Hook, and it sells like vegan fish and chips. And he also uses that to tour around to like local fishing communities where they can say, oh, here's a better option. He gives out free samples. He's an amazing man. And there was just like pizza for breakfast, croissants, smoothies, pancakes, and then it's also a music festival a bit too. And they have like one area, they have a bunch of like different buildings, really. One building is the main stage that just does main speaking. One building does activism speaking. And so they talk about like effective activism, how to do activism, because a lot of people go to vegan events, but they might be vegan, but they're not like activists. They haven't done activism, or they don't know how to get into activism, or maybe they just eat vegan, but that's it. And so they tell you basically how you can go about being a vegan activist, getting involved in your local vegan communities, and stuff of that nature. And just really, I mean, it's also, I didn't go to this area, but there's also an area for families, because families go to it. And so it's an all range kind of event. And so, yeah, and then just like amazing people you meet. And there's actually a group of people that organize to meet together who are going on their own, because I didn't go with a group of anybody. I just went on my own. I met like a few other people while I was there, and we camped sort of in the same area together. And so that was really helpful, because I was worried I wouldn't know anyone really. So
And how long did it go for?
the actual event went from Friday in the afternoon to about, I think it was like Saturday, like Sunday in the afternoon. Yes. And so the main speakers were Friday and then Saturday, and then Sunday is just basically the food's still there. And every morning also they have a workout area, which is like, some people go there, amazing bodybuilders, and they wake up at like 5 a.m. and run around the whole campsite, and then do like you got a range of people that go there. So yeah.
Right. Cool. And so I know you were disappointed that it was canceled, of course.
Yeah.
But is it going to happen in 2021?
Well, the UK has said that they've estimated their lockdown timeline, and they've estimated it will ease the lockdown. But I don't know how they can quite predict this. But the government in the UK, we haven't done anything like this in Canada. I think they're a little bit ambitious, frankly. But they've estimated that by the time because it's at the end of August, so it's quite later in the summer. So they've estimated that by the end of August, they can ease the lockdown enough to allow for, I'm not really sure how they can allow 10,000 people to be on one. But what they did is, because most people kept their tickets from last year and they moved it over to this year, a lot of the tickets have already been sold. Right. So it's really, really popular. I think about like 80% of the tickets. And this year, a big speaker is coming. Russell Brand is coming. Like, he is the main big speaker. And then other people, like if you ever saw the Game Changers, Patrick Waboumian from the Game Changers will be there. Joey Carbstrong, a really amazing cooking duo called Bosch is going to be there, and there's just a whole like list of really amazing speakers. So yeah,
maybe they'll put it on Zoom. We can all go.
They do have a lot of the videos. People video them, and they can see the videos. They usually not live when you're actually watching them, although it would be useless for people in Canada, it'd be at night, right? Because the time change. But they do video a lot of them. If you go on to YouTube, you can pretty much watch most of the videos. Like one of the better speakers from 2019 were probably like Earthling Up was pretty great. There was the vegan couple was amazing. There was one guy who was really amazing. People were basically actually almost in tears listening to him. His name was Alex Herschaft. I don't know if anyone's heard about him. And he is an amazing man. Like, he grew up, unfortunately, when he was 5 years old, he left, he escaped from the Holocaust, basically, right? So when he was older, he wanted to like pay back, because he felt like, why do I get to survive when all these other people didn't make it through the Holocaust? And he was sort of toying with this idea in his head. And basically, when he did other activists and stuff, but never really worked for him. When he was somewhere in the 70s, I don't remember, he went to a slaughterhouse and he visited, and it actually reminded him of exactly what he went through during the Holocaust. Wow. And so that notion of the idea said, well, if we're going to abolish the Holocaust, why are we still doing animal agriculture, which is almost exactly the same, keeping people in cages, branding, very much in the same line? And he just decided, I'm going to go vegan that day. And he has one of the oldest farm sanctuaries in North America, pretty much. And he does tons of work around the world. And his speech just was really moving. And he just talked all about his experience. And yeah, that was probably one of the better ones that was there. Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Well, Peter, I miss our vegan groups, local gatherings that we used to be able to have.
Me too.
is there still some activism going on? Like what's your favorite kind of activism for the animal?
Well, I mean, I don't really have one specific kind of activism, my favorite. I mean, we did do the horse carriage thing briefly in the summertime because some of the lockdown restrictions were eased slightly, and the COVID wasn't that bad during the summer. So we did go to the horse carriages, and we unfortunately got a lot of pushback because they claimed we were scaring the horses with all our crazy activism. But that's the horse carriages for you. And so we did that for a while in the summer, and yeah, as I said, because of COVID, I might start switching more to like online activism. I don't really have one favorite type of activism. I just want to work with like governments, work with people, and try to like sort of convince everyone that basically just sort of show them that. I also really want to try to connect the idea that if you are concerned about any kind of group, if you want to eliminate things like ableism, you want to eliminate things like sexism, racism. I mean, you should also think about going further than that and say, why are we still doing speciesism? I mean, a lot of these organizations, I went to a conference when I was younger, a few years ago, actually in Victoria, called Inclusion BC, but there was no talk about speciesism at all. I mean, there wasn't really the point of the conference, but people were very concerned about a lot of disabled individuals, and there was also talk about LGBT and other stuff, but then they just sat down to a big meal of animal foods. Well, it's like, to me, that's counterproductive because you're basically you're saying this is as far as our concern about these things will go, but once we eat the meal, we're just performing speciesism. So to me, I think people should take it all the way. They shouldn't concern themselves with one thing and then also be like go ahead and have a meal of dead animals. So
Right. And even if, if you're busy, like you're already busy with your other form of activism, it doesn't mean you can't be vegan. Like you can be vegan and work for disability rights. You can be
for sure.
vegan and work for the environment. You can be vegan and work for feminist issues,
Right.
right? But those sort of the minimum that we should be doing is being vegan.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned feminine issues. I mean, you say you're going to be a feminist, but then mother cows are exploited in the dairy industry. So your feminism is only, if you're a feminist but you still drink milk, you're not really, in my opinion, you're not really a feminist because you're concerned only about human women. Well, what about the cows? What about the mother cows that are exploited in the dairy industry? So it's counterproductive to say you're going to be an activist for anything and then go ahead and consume the products that are basically causing just as much of a problem. So yeah, you don't have to be a vegan activist per se, but you at least have to not contribute to the furthering of the industry.
Right, right on. Well, thank you, Peter. It's been really lovely to speak to you today. And do you have anything else that you want to say before we go?
Just say that, well, what I want to see, I mean, moving forward, what I would like to see in both disability organizations and vegan organizations, just as I said, really just getting people more better supports and just focusing on making sure that everyone is aware and educated. And there's also going to be an event on, because I don't know if anyone's aware that April 2nd is technically called Autism Awareness Day, although I'm trying to rebrand it to Autism Acceptance Day, because that's what we want to brand it towards. And we're going to have an event on the day, a Zoom thing it's the first I've ever done this kind of event where they're going to talk about ableism, speciesism, sexism on the, I don't really know what it's going to be like. I've never done this before, but I saw it online. I'm joining up on it. And I just think that is a really important day because I want to bring back the day to make it more about people, because a lot of the supports organizations will tell you this is what you need, this is what you're supposed to have, this is what you're supposed to do, and that's not the case. Even if physically somebody is disabled and they can't physically speak, a lot of autistics, not a lot, but a certain group of autistics are completely nonverbal. But that doesn't mean they don't have thoughts or feelings. They just physically aren't able to make the voice count, but they might use a typing computer or they might use something else. So I think it's very important to listen to the voices of people. Like, again, even animals can't maybe talk with your language, but you hear them, they're in distress. You hear noises coming from them that clearly state a distress. So we should not speak for anything. We should listen to other groups and other organizations and listen to what they have to say and basically take it from there, take their voices. Yeah.
Nothing about us without us, right?
Definitely. Exactly. Yes.
All right.
100%.
Well, you continue to stay safe, Peter, and I hope we get to our paths cross someday soon out there in the world.
Definitely.
All right. And I'm looking forward to your YouTube channel. Make sure you let us know what that's
I
about.
will, when that gets started up. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but when that gets started up, I will definitely keep people informed. Yes.
Awesome.